Good evening. How are you? So happy to have all of you with us. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Elections.
And I'm Bennie Smith, Shelby County Election Commissioner from Memphis, Tennessee, and Technical Advisor for Smart Elections.
And this is the Election Protection Forum, and we are delighted that you are with us. Thank you so much. We have a very, very interesting forum for you this evening. We're going to be talking about the Arizona audit, and our guest tonight is Ken Bennett. He was the official liaison of the Arizona audit, and so he was intimately involved in the process. And we're very interested in his experience and his takeaways because there's been so much controversy about the audit that we think it's really helpful to try to touch base with an original source, somebody who was there, who was involved, who can give us really an on-the-ground perspective and who's been willing to show a great deal of objectivity about the process. So thank you so much for being with us. And I just want to, great, okay, I know that we have Ken here, so that's great. And we are trying to welcome people from all different backgrounds, especially people with disabilities, and make them feel included. And so we're going to do a visual description. Bennie, do you want to go first?
I muted myself. Yes, I can go first. Bennie Smith, black male, low haircut. I'm wearing a white dress shirt, and I'm standing in front of 6 computer monitors, like I'm probably playing a video game.
It's a special elections video game.
Yeah.
I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm a white woman with long brown hair, but mostly hidden under a headset with bangs and a brown blazer with a brick wall behind me. And we also have an ASL interpreter with us. Her name is Alana. Do you want to give a visual
Hi.
description?
Sure. My name is Alana. I have a blue background. I'm white woman, short brown hair, and glasses, as well as a headset and black shirt.
Super. And then we do want to let you know that closed captioning is available on Facebook if you need it. And you just go to look for the instructions on Facebook about how to turn your closed captioning on. It is in the settings. And if you want to know more about us, you're going to go to our website, smartelections.us. And while you're there, do please sign up for our mailing list. And if you want to get in touch with us, you're going to do so at contact@smartelections.us. We would love to have positive feedback. And you can also put that into the comments if you really are appreciating the information that we're providing, the nonpartisan perspective, really the way that we're bringing people across the political spectrum together. Please do put that in the chat. That's really wonderful. And love that from Julie. Love hearing, I know, I like that too. Julie saying, love hearing how people choose to describe themselves. I feel like you learned something too. Like Alana said her hair was short, but I thought her hair was kind of long. So maybe I'm like wondering, did she used to have much longer hair?
I don't think
So
I've repeated myself once.
I always describe myself as pale because I'm just always stuck to my computer screen and never get out in the sun. Yeah, so put the information into the chat, how you're feeling, what you're thinking. We do really try to be very participatory and encourage you to really join the dialogue. This is about learning and sharing our thoughts with each other. And you can also send those to us at contact@smartelections.us. And if there's things that you want improved or you have suggestions, please do send those as well. And we are going to mention that we are in the midst of a fundraising drive. And so we do hope that when you go to contact@smartelections.us, you will make a donation there. And we depend on your donations. We cannot do the work that we are doing now unless we have those funds. And I will go ahead and put a link into the chat of where you can donate. We have a campaign up right now. So the easiest way to find this is to go to smartelections.us. So actually, you don't even have to click on right when you get to smartelections.us, there is a donate link. So I'm going to walk you through it because it'll probably take you about 3 minutes. And I know that you've been meaning to donate to us if you haven't donated yet. And so this is the perfect time. Just right now, while I'm walking you through it, you can go ahead and do it with me. So go ahead and go to smartelections.us, and I'll put that into the chat. Totally easy to remember email address. And I'm going to put that into my browser, and we're going to go there together. So I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go to smartelections.us together. And then when you get here, you are going to click on the donate button. And there's two options. You can look at our dedications, which is a wonderful new page that we have. I'm really excited about it. And this is where you can make a dedication to somebody who's special to you. So for example, one of our viewers, Bob Stromberg, made a dedication for his donation to Timothy Snyder, somebody who really inspired him. So you can go ahead, and any amount can be turned into a dedication. And then when you're on the website, instead of choosing dedication, if you just click on that donate, that will take you to our fundraising campaign. I think it's loading now. And StreamYard is a little bit awkward. You have to keep loading the websites into each new page. But this is our fundraising campaign right now that we have up. And you can see that our goal is to raise $25,000 by the end of the year. We have 6 days left. We've raised almost 2,500, so about 10% of our goal. So you can see that we have a ways to go. And there's a video there that I'm going to play for you in the middle of the program. So you'll get to see this new video that we made, really describing our work and how critical it is that we get your support. So we're going to just move forward now and welcome our guest, Ken Bennett. As I said, he's the official liaison of the Arizona Audit. And we're going to rearrange ourselves a little bit here. I think that we can put Ken in the hot seat.
Yeah, put him in the hot seat.
Thanks, Bennie.
Okay. And we're going to put our ASL interpreter up at the top so everybody can see her. And Ken, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
Super. And go ahead and give...
Good to see my friend Bennie again.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Ken.
Bennie, you were out there and watched the audit, right?
Yeah, I got to hang out with Ken a good bit.
Cool. Ken, just tell us a little bit about your background. I think it's very fascinating for people to know you did not come into this uninformed. You have a very long history of working with elections.
Well, I am born and raised Arizonan and have kind of had a dual career. I've worked in the business world. I got an accounting degree from Arizona State University many more years ago than I would probably want to admit. And worked in a family business that is 83 years old that my grandparents started, Bennett Oil Company. We supply gasoline and diesel fuel and lubricants, and was the CEO of that company for 20 some years. But I also kind of got into public service with the election to the local city council here in Prescott, Arizona, where I was raised and have raised my family. I'm married 40 years this coming May and have 3 grown children and 4 grandchildren. Wow. And in my political career, I did the city council here in Prescott and then the state board of education for 7 years. And then I got elected to the state senate in 1999 and served for 8 years. 4 of those 8 years, I was president of the Arizona Senate. And then we had term limits, so I took a little break. And then a few years later, in 2009, excuse me, was appointed as Secretary of State for the state of Arizona when Jan Brewer ascended to the governorship from the Secretary of State position. Arizona is one of those weird states that does not have a lieutenant governor. The Secretary of State is the lieutenant governor. And so when Janet Napolitano, who I served with when I was a state senator, when she left the governor's office to be on President Obama's cabinet, Jan Brewer, who became the governor, appointed me to replace her. I served for 6 years, was reelected in 2010, and served until early 2015. And as the Secretary of State in Arizona, you are the chief elections official per state law and state statute and the Constitution. But
And
really, elections happen at the county levels. We have 15 counties, and I work very closely with the 15 counties, each of whom has a recorder and an elections director. So I've been the Secretary of State and overseen elections. I oversaw 12 statewide elections during my 6 years. But I've also been a legislator, so I kind of have that perspective from how the laws are written. And then I have a private sector background as well. And as I said, I'm an accountant. I like the debits to equal the credits.
Okay, so you have a very deep knowledge base of elections, and in particular elections there in Arizona.
I think so.
Okay, and I'm going to just ask you to keep your, let's try to keep we'll try to keep our questions tight, and you can try to keep your answers a little tight, and we'll get through more information for people.
Sounds
but
good.
it was very helpful to just kind of get a sense of your background. The Arizona audit, was there anything like that previously to your knowledge, or was it really completely new territory?
No, this was completely new territory for Arizona. Never had a legislative body really kind of forced an audit on an election. We've had some, during my 6 years, we had one statewide election that was within 200 votes and had to be recounted, but it wasn't anything as critical as a presidential race. And so an audit like we had for Maricopa County was unprecedented here in Arizona.
And who conducted that audit that you did, of that statewide race that was close? Was it the state?
In the statewide race in 2010, it was a proposition on the ballot that the voters were voting on directly. And we didn't audit the election so much as it only was passing out of 2 million votes cast statewide. It was only passing by 126 votes. And it's the first time in the history of the state of Arizona that it triggered a state statute that says you have to recount a statewide election if it's within 200 votes. And so we didn't audit the election maybe as much as we just recounted 2 million votes statewide.
By hand? Was it by hand?
No, the 15 counties used their machines like they had done in the first count. So it was not a hand count of all 2 million ballots. So the audit, hand counting all 2 million ballots in the Maricopa County election of 2020, was unprecedented in the sense that we were hand counting the ballots.
And it was also different for a number of other reasons, because it sounds like in that 2010 race, the counties just ran their ballots through the machines themselves.
Right.
They checked their own work.
Correct.
Right. So here with the 2020 Arizona audit, an independent firm called Cyber Ninjas was hired, and they were chosen by some of the Senate Republicans. Is that correct?
Yes. In Arizona, the two houses of our legislature, the Senate and the House, are narrow majorities in favor of the Republicans at the moment. And the Arizona Senate chose to do the audit of Maricopa County kind of on its own. The House did not join. There was no involvement from the executive branch, the governor's office, or any other executive offices. So it was kind of the Arizona Senate choosing to do the audit on its own.
Okay, and I'm just going to switch out our ASL interpreters now. Okay, great. So there was a lot of controversy about the choice that the Arizona Senate made of this firm called the Cyber Ninjas. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I didn't have anything to do with making that choice. It was a decision primarily by the Senate President Karen Fann, who I know very well. She's from the same legislative district that I served from, so I've known her most of my adult life. The first thing that she did when she decided that they were going to do the audit was called the Election Assistance Commission in Washington and asked if there was a list of approved election auditors, and was told that there is no such list. And so she kind of started putting out feelers and ended up being told about cyber ninjas. And there was 2 or 3 other either companies or groups that bid on being the auditors, but they selected cyber ninjas.
I
Which
think
is not really cyber ninjas is not really an election auditing
They're not
firm.
audited.
They are really a very small, I think it's one principal actor, Doug Logan out of Sarasota, Florida. And he's really kind of a white hat hacker. He contracts with companies to break into their systems to help them make their systems less susceptible to break-ins from people who have malicious intent. And so he was really more of a white hat hacker company, but apparently it had something to do with the, is it Antrim County?
The Antrim County, Michigan count?
Michigan. And so somehow he had become involved in that. And maybe that's how Karen Fan heard about him as a quote potential auditor, but he's not. And I don't know that anybody else really in the country at the time was specifically an election auditor.
I mean, there are people in the country who are very skilled at auditing elections, actually. And we have one of them in the audience right now, Neil McBurnett. I can see because he just put a question up. Neil, I think that's a really good question, and we're going to get to that when we get to the audits. But there, I think you pointed out a number of things that are very helpful for us to think about. And one is that the state needed help, and they reached out to the Election Assistance Commission and did not get the help that they need. And I think it's just one more example of how the Election Assistance Commission is a toothless agency. It is far too tied to vendors and is really on a regular basis not doing the job that it needs to do. And I hate to be so harsh on them because I know there's people there who are tremendously competent. Tina Barton is a new ad there, and I think she's done terrific work. I love her, but as an agency, it is very, very weak and needs to be strengthened.
Well, I think it's important to note that the hierarchy in which the audit took place, when I got to Arizona to work with Ken Bennett, I had to find out that you are the liaison, but not necessarily in charge of the contractors. I guess that probably would be something that would be worth explaining because a lot of people saw it through your eyes. You were always getting the questions and all the interviews, and they thought that after they finished talking to you that you could go back and do something with the contractors, but that wasn't the hierarchy. That wasn't the case.
That's correct, Benny. I did not have, in addition to not having anything to do with selecting the auditor, I didn't have anything to do with really supervising or overseeing the day-to-day operations of the audit. There was a scope of work between the Senate and the auditor company and their subcontractors that they hired. For a few weeks, I was part of some of those meetings, but it became clear that I always didn't say things the way that they wanted me to say
You
them.
had some Democrats in the room.
So what was your official role? Can you just define it briefly?
I was asked by President Fan to be the eyes and ears. That's kind of the words that she described as a liaison, because the legislature was already in session. And so they couldn't come down on a daily basis. And they asked me to be the liaison since I'd had some legislative experience as one of them and a Secretary of State overseeing elections. And so I was supposed to be their eyes and ears. But as Benny mentioned, I kind of became the face of the audit to the media. But I think people assumed that since I was trying to answer questions about what was going on, that after an interview was over, that I had something to do with deciding what happened in the next minute or hour, the next day or whatever. And I really didn't. I was just more of a interface between Senate President Fan and any of the other senators. Some of them did come down and visit like Benny did, but many did not. And so I was really just trying to help make sure that the audit was successful, but I didn't have any supervisory authority to tell the auditors, do this or don't do that.
That's very interesting. That's very similar to the Election Assistance Commission, which also has more of an advisory role, but doesn't actually have teeth as an agency. It doesn't have any regulatory power. So I think it's very important to remember that when we want elections to go a certain way, we do need to have maybe statutes or regulatory agencies or people such as yourselves who are knowledgeable, who do have more control. So I think that's a really great point. Now, do you think that the audit was necessary? And if so, why?
I actually do. And the way I've been able to best describe it is to kind of bring the numbers down to something that people can wrap their heads around. And I've picked 1,000. Let's say Arizona was 1,000 people. That happens to be in Old England. You know, when 1,000 people lived together, they called it a shire. And so if Arizona was a shire of 1,000 people and 80% voted in the election, as was the case in the November 2020 election.
In Arizona, 67% nationwide, but Arizona had very high turnout.
Arizona had 80% turnout. So if Arizona was 1,000 people and 800 of them participated in the election, voted, here's how close the presidential race was in Arizona. Biden got 401 votes and Trump got 399. 2 votes out of 800 is what the margin of difference or victory between the two of them were in the presidential election in Arizona. By far the closest presidential election we've ever had.
In Arizona.
In Arizona.
And what is that exact percentage? What was the percentage, the margin of difference?
It's 0.3%. So 0.3%.
0.3%.
It was about 10,457 votes, if I remember correctly, out of about 3.4 million votes cast statewide. But again, to bring it down to numbers that people can more easily relate to, it was 2 out of 800. That's 0.3% as well.
Now,
so
did that, I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in here. I'm known to interrupt people, but please don't take it personally. So I know in New York, there's a statute now that if the margin is 0.5% or closer, they have to do a hand recount. Now, what is the Arizona statute regarding that, regarding when you have to do a recount?
200 votes statewide.
So this was not that close.
This was not as close as the statutory margin says. As I mentioned, that election in 2010 for a proposition that people really didn't care too much about, but that was the only race that was within 200 votes between the winner or loser and triggered a formal recount. But this was 0.3%. Now, we do have some mechanisms in Arizona state law, for example, that after an election, the counties do a hand count of a small sampling of the ballots and compare those hand count totals to the machine count totals. And if those are within 0.5%, then it's considered okay. But here, the margin of victory between the two presidential candidates was less than even that. It was 0.3%. Now, when Maricopa County, hand counted about 8,000 of their 2.1 million ballots, they matched exactly with the machines. And so you will hear claims by Maricopa County that, we already hand counted and did an audit. In Arizona, it's called a hand count audit, but they only hand counted 8,000 of 2.1 million. So that's like counting 3 out of the 800 ballots and saying, trust us on the other 797. So when you think about the election in numbers that people can kind of relate to, if you have a race where 800 people vote and the winner wins by 2 votes, an interesting thing was on 1% of the ballots in Arizona, or just shy of, on over 33,000 of the 3.4 million ballots cast in Arizona, the machines didn't read any vote for any of the presidential candidates. In the Shire story that I've been relating to, that would be like somebody winning or losing a race by 2 votes out of 800, and then the election director of the Shire saying, on 8 of those ballots, the machines didn't even record a vote for either one of you. And maybe that's what the voters intended, or maybe they circled an oval or checked next to it. And so just from the standpoint that we had 1% of the ballots where the machines hadn't registered a vote for president, but the margin of victory in that race was 1/3 of that, less than 1/3 of that. To me, that says there's nothing wrong to having an audit and verifying that we've counted every ballot correctly. Because if you had lost a race by 2 out of 800, you'd want to make sure that every ballot was counted correctly.
I agree with you. I think that we need more audits. I would like to see audits of every race, unless it's a huge margin, unless you're talking about 70 to 30%, something like that. Smart Elections is advocating for routine audits of all races and really conducted by independent agencies, although not necessarily an agency like the Cyber Ninjas that has that partisan bias. We know from news reports and films that the Cyber Ninjas did have a bias and that they thought that the election had been rigged. And so whenever you have a strong bias like that, that's really problematic when you have that team, in an official capacity. But I certainly agree with you that we need to see more routine audits, and especially when you have those close races. One thing that we know is that voting machines, if a voter circles that little oval instead of filling it in, most often the machine does not read that. But that is a vote that can be seen by a hand-eye comparison when you do a hand count.
Ken, I thought you was going to present the Arizona Shire. I've seen you do it 100 times. I guess you didn't submit your slides. Maybe if you have a link to it, you can do it, because I watched you present this to CNN and a bunch of other news agencies. And it's a really good way to make it concise, and it covers literally all the questions she's about to ask you and have asked you down into an example where you can really digest it.
I'll share something with Smart Elections, Lulu, that maybe you could post on your website if people want to watch it. I was very honored that Bennie felt that the Shire story, which goes on a little bit further, and I don't want to.
Yeah, you got your 4 uns, and she just covered one of them. Yeah, she just covered one of them.
Hang on one second. I'm going to switch out the interpreters.
Okay.
Yeah, she's in one of the 4 uns.
Okay.
I'm in one of the 4 what?
Uns.
Wait, no. We don't have time. We do not have time.
Okay.
We have so much other stuff to get to, but please do send us that. And we are going to look at a fair number of documents, and we will get them all up on the website for people. And we have some great.
You referred to one of them just naturally, Lulu, and I think this is important why Bennie's bringing this up.
Yeah.
If you had lost a race of 800 voters by 2 votes, and you knew, just as you noted, that 8 of those ballots didn't register any vote for president, and you started to wonder, well, maybe some people circled their oval or checked next to it. Were there any votes uncounted? And that's the first of 4 uns. And so we won't go into all of the other uns, but you naturally went to where the Shire story kind of starts. And that is, what would the loser of an election by 2 out of 800 votes want to ask the election director? And the first one would be, when told that on 8 of the ballots there wasn't any vote registered by the machines for their race, they would want to know, were there any votes uncounted?
Right. And then we have a question here from Jeff. He says, should Arizona have audited the other 14 counties?
Well, 60%, the short answer is no. I don't think that was necessary. They could have maybe picked a medium-sized county. By far, Maricopa County is the largest of the 15 in Arizona. 60% of the vote in Arizona comes from Maricopa County. 20% comes
how much? What percent? Because you broke up a little bit. 60% of the whole state comes from Maricopa County.
Comes from Maricopa. That's the Phoenix area.
And Maricopa is, I think, the second largest jurisdiction in the country as well.
Correct.
It's bigger than, like, I think 20 other states. It's huge.
Correct. Yeah. And so we really looked at 60% of the statewide vote by looking at the one county of Maricopa. Another 20% of the vote comes out of the Tucson area, which is Pima County. And then the other 13 counties combined make up the last 20%. So you got 60, 20, 20, and they looked at the 60.
Okay, well, I'm just going to disagree with you, and I'm going to say to Jeff, yes, I think that Arizona should have audited the other 14 counties, because I believe that we need to have routine audits of all races if they're contested, unless it's a very, very wide margin of victory. And I also think, let me just say that I would have liked to see them audit the races further down the ballot.
I agree with that. Yes.
In Maricopa County, rather than just the two top races. But let's just move on. We've got some other questions here. And I think the next question is, let's really look now at the results, at what happened. We do have a report, a formal report. And I think I have that up on my desktop. And so I'm going to share that. I asked Ken what he thought, like, kind of the best document to show people was, to really get a sense of the takeaway. And this is the document that he guided us toward. And so I think this is where we want to start. This is just from the formal Cyber Ninja report. And I've tried to blow it up pretty big. Let's see how we're looking in our screen. I think that's pretty big. I think most people can hopefully see that. And this is the summary of the Cyber Ninja report. And I think the main point, Ken, as I understand it, that you really wanted to make sure that people understand is that
it's the third paragraph, right there. Stay right there. On the positive side, there was no substantial differences between the hand count of the ballots provided and the official election canvass results for Maricopa County. This is an important finding, and this is the first finding in the executive summary, because they say the paper ballots are the best evidence of voter intent, and there is no reliable evidence that the paper ballots were altered to any material degree. So the first and fundamental finding was that hand counting 2.1 million ballots in Maricopa County gave us almost identical results as the county had given us by machine 10 months earlier.
And that's very important, because people have been really concerned and saying that maybe the audit found a lot of, problematic issues. And the big picture is that what the hand count audit found was that the results were accurate, correct?
Yes. Now, just below that, it goes into several other areas where they did find issues in how Maricopa County conducted the election that need to be improved in our future elections so that people have complete confidence in an election. I mean, you can say we want people to have 99% confidence in their elections. Well, this was a race that needed 99.8% confidence because the difference between the winner and the loser was 0.3%. But we really need, and I would agree, Lulu, that we actually need to audit every election, but in a different way than what you saw unfold in the Maricopa, Arizona audit.
Great. I think that's a great point. And we're just going to put a pin in it there. And then when we come back, we'll talk about what specifically were the findings. There were some things that concerned me. There were some discrepancies that I found concerning, especially in sort of ballot reconciliation. And then you have some really great suggestions that you've put together with your team. And I think we're very interested in hearing those. And hopefully maybe we have a little time for some questions. So we're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with you, Ken. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do now is just take a quick look at this new video that we have that tells you about our work. And I think that I hope that you'll find it exciting. We're really excited to share it with you. And it's just about 3 minutes.
I'm a founder and the executive director of Smart Elections. I'm here to ask for your significant support for something that affects every part of our lives, our elections. The 2020 election wasn't just a race for the White House, it was an ordeal. While many people were surprised by what happened, I was not, because I had been investigating and creating documentary pieces about our elections for years. My investigations have received more than 4 million views online and received a Best Documentary Award. I knew our elections were vulnerable to mistakes and hacking and also the loss of confidence that can be even more insidious.
We don't vote. We don't vote.
But unlike many others who were at a loss for what to do, by 2020, I had already begun to work towards solutions. In 2019, I co-founded Smart Elections with experienced colleagues that I trust, who have a deep knowledge base of our elections and especially about the technology that we use. We want the public to have full confidence in election results. We work with top academics and expert advisors to fully understand the issues and then break them down so the public can follow them easily. As more people understand the problems with our elections, the likelihood that we will find workable solutions increases. Another important part of our work is meaningful public oversight of elections. In 2020, while we did not find anything that would have changed the results, in Georgia, we did find lost votes, sloppy accounting, and a concerning inconsistency in how votes were counted. The governor of Georgia released a similar report about the Georgia elections. But one of the key differences between our report and the governor's is that our report was released almost a year earlier, only 2 months after the election. The timing makes all the difference. If we can conduct public oversight of elections in a meaningful way, in real time, as they happen, we can assure the public that the results are accurate, or quickly locate and solve problems when they occur. We are preparing to monitor the 2022 midterms and hope to be able to conduct meaningful oversight in all swing states in the 2024 presidential election. You can help make that plan a reality. Even mainstream outlets like CNN are warning that our democracy is in danger, saying the last 4 years have proven how tenuous a hold democracy has on the public, and that if we don't fight for truth, fairness, and facts, we are in danger of losing them forever. Please, please, make a donation today. We're counting on you so that you can count on us and we can count the votes together accurately. Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing to protect your vote.
So that was our video, and hopefully you were inspired by that to make a donation. I did put the link into the chat again, and we really do depend on your donations. It is actually not possible for us to continue this work unless we have support. We need a lot of resources in order to do the public oversight work, especially we're preparing to do public oversight of the 2022 midterms. And we need to bring more staff on board. We need better computers and hard drives. So I know that you love our programs because you come back week after week and are participating. And so just think about what this means. Our elections are not going to get better unless we take these actions, unless we inform the public about what needs to be done and then help do it. So please, please do take a moment and make a tax-deductible donation. And do remember to let us know who you want to dedicate it to. Okay, so we're going to bring Ken back, and let's keep going. The next thing we want to look at is the actual findings that were put out, and I can put that into the chat. I believe there's a lot of links at this chat where you can find a lot of the documents that we're going to be looking at. And the first thing that I think I'd like to look at, we already looked at that official report, but we also have a PowerPoint with some of the findings, and some of these are, I think, a little bit more troubling than the findings that, you know, say that basically the audit just, you know, was reassuring and got the right results. But there were some things in there that were a little troubling. And Ken, do you want to just talk to start with about any concerns that you had about what was discovered?
Well, you know, we had concerns, for example, that state law was not followed when they did duplicate ballots, that a serial number is supposed to be put on the original and the duplicated ballot. And we opened the first 2 boxes of duplicated ballots and found no such serial numbers. And those numbers are important to track, that we have one of these for one of those, and that the votes from the original were correctly duplicated onto the one that went through the machine and was counted. That was one small example of things that we found. The auditors found that most of the people in the county, most of the hundreds of workers that worked in a county as large as Maricopa, were all using the same usernames and passwords in the IT system.
Let me get Bennie in here just to talk about why that would be a problem. Why is that a problem if everybody's using the same username and password?
Just share your bank account with everybody.
That's
Share
what I
log
love.
into your bank account with all your friends.
Bennie just cuts right to the chase. Okay. What else, Ken, did you find that was disturbing?
Well, we found of a very voluminous amount of material that was delivered to the Senate per the subpoena that the Senate issued. There were thousands of files that were deleted, or that the log files showed that thousands of files had been deleted just a few days before material was delivered to the Senate. Now, I don't think these were results files or anything that changed any results, but I think most of them were some log files and things like that. And there were all kinds of things that I'm trying to think of some of the others real quickly, but
let me just ask you that. Why would log files have been deleted? Is there any legitimate reason to be deleting data after an election?
I don't think so. And in fact, the county denied for months that anything had been deleted until, in front of a hearing in Congress, one of the state rep or U.S. Congressman from Arizona asked the county officials directly, I have a report here that looks like some files were deleted. Were some files deleted? And they admitted in front of Congress, a hearing of Congress, that they had deleted thousands of files. And when asked, why did you think that was okay? Well, we had copies of those same files in our archives. So we thought we could delete them from the stuff we gave the Senate. Well, did you give your archives to the Senate? No. So it was just one thing after another of things that could be tightened up in our elections. And
yeah, I think I was there with you, Ken, when I think Cyber Ninjas announced it, but I think you were finding out literally while we were sitting there with Kyung La from CNN. And I was clueless. I think you were just finding that out too. That's another to underscore the point that Kim was the liaison. He wasn't quarterbacking a lot of this stuff. And I think I was able to look at some of those and determine that you technically shouldn't be deleting any types of files because you had them all frozen and you had them duplicated because it was a subpoena. So under no circumstances do I think you delete anything. You give everything whole and you tell me what to use and what not to. But when you delete something, I don't know what it is anymore. Right.
That's a great point. We're going to switch out our interpreters again. So just give me one moment. I really appreciate all of our interpreters being here. Let's see.
It's so hard not to look at them. Wow.
Well, we're very grateful. We're very, very grateful for their work. So I want to ask a couple questions that people have put up that are somewhat critical of the audit process and see if you can have a response for these, Ken. This is from Neil McBurnett. Neil's been very involved in Colorado in the risk limiting audits there, very knowledgeable about audits. And he says, why didn't the audit compare vote count batch by batch? That would have made it so much more helpful for quality improvement. And I think we first have to establish what a batch by batch comparison is for people who may not be familiar with that.
Well, I agree completely that
right.
The best way to count or to have done the audit is by batches. When a election jurisdiction conducts an election, they decide to process ballots in batches. Maricopa County, for I assume several reasons, decided that their typical batch was going to be 100. I live a little north of in northern Arizona in Yavapai County. Yavapai County uses batches of 200. Now they use different systems, but each county can decide to we're going to do the election in batches of 100 or 200 or whatever they decide to do. The election in Maricopa County, those 2.1 million ballots were counted in 10,341 batches. Some batches were as small as one ballot in a batch. Other ballots were as big as almost 1,000 ballots in a batch at a voting center location, for example. But 98% of the batches done by Maricopa County were around the 200 number. And behind the scenes, the auditors were supposedly counting using the same batch numbers and batches that the county did, but it wasn't evident in the report that kind of came out publicly that they were as focused on counting by batches as the questioner, I think, rightfully questions. That should have been one of the focuses. I think there could have been more focus on the cast vote record, where each individual batches or each individual ballot is identified as to the votes that were tabulated on each ballot.
Right, and we'll get into that, I think, because you make some very specific recommendations. But
Yeah, I
I
want
just
to get
I
back
think
here
this
for
is
a minute, Ken, because that's stuff that Ken was saying in real time too.
Yeah, I wish they'd have done it more in batches, and it was unfortunate that they didn't have a little more focus on counting in the same batches that Maricopa County did.
right. My understanding is that because of the way the audit was done, it was actually impossible to do a reconciliation.
Well, some boxes, we opened some boxes, and there would be a batch summary report. You could see it sticking out of the side of, below 100 ballots, and you'd see another one about 100 ballots below. But there were other boxes that and in those cases, the auditors counted them in batches. But in other boxes, we opened the boxes, and all the batch summary reports were combined together, slipped down the side, and all 1,300 or whatever many ballots were in that box were just all together. So,
so you're saying let me, because I hadn't understood this previously. So you're saying it was the way that the county stored the ballots that made it impossible to do a batch by batch comparison, because they were not neatly organized in batches of 50 or batches of 100 that could be compared over and over again. We have 50 ballots here. Yes, we counted them. There's 50 ballots here. We have 50 ballots here. Yes, we counted them. There's 50 ballots. That reconciliation process was not possible. Is that what you're telling me? Because that is a normal part of doing an audit or a recount or even an initial count of ballots, is that you make sure that you know how many ballots you're dealing with, and then you make sure that that is the same number on your, on your tally sheet.
You are correct, Lulu.
Okay, so why was the audit not done that way? Was it because the way the county stored the ballots, or was it the auditor's choice not to do a reconciliation ballot, like batch by batch?
It was more the boxes that they opened up and found all of the batch summary reports stuffed down the side, and all the
it's impossible
together. It was impossible for them to figure out, how they had batched
which batch was which set of ballots, what order it was in.
Okay, so what we're saying here is that it really was not the auditor's fault that they couldn't reconcile, but it was a county storage. And so probably what we need also are more regulations or protocols about how counties store their ballots. And I think it's something that you are talking about. You call it a ballot library or a ballot manifest, Ken. And let's get into your recommendations of what you think really needs to happen going forward, because you and John Brakey put together some very specific recommendations. And there's 4 points that I think you wanted to make, and that you're working with the Arizona legislature to get these into statute. And what are those 4 recommendations specifically?
Well, the 4 recommendations are the public release of documents or reports that would allow elections to be audited within 10 days by anyone who wants to audit them, not 10 months by some hand-picked auditor by whoever picked them. And if I learned one thing from the audit, it is that we need to have a level of transparency in place going forward so that elections can be audited in 10 days, not 10 months. And the 4 documents that John and I have, and I think Bennie maybe has seen some of these and probably could weigh in if he supports them, but the 4 documents, one of them would be before the election and 3 would be right after the election before the certification. The one document that I believe that should be released publicly before the election is the list of eligible voters who can participate in that election, sortable by name, address, and precinct. We don't need social security numbers or last fours of this or cell phones or whatever, but this is all public information that really is part of the data that can either be given political parties or can be purchased by campaigns to do their mailing lists and things like walk lists and things like that. So this is already public information.
Yep.
So let me
But
just check in. I want to check in with Bennie on this because this is something that I wanted to find out, say from voting rights groups. Is that a problem to make sure that the list of eligible voters is released, or as Ken said, is that standard operating procedure?
It's standard. I work with John Breaker on this and Ken, so you can just let them go all the way through it. It's definitely something that you can get. I do it every time when I'm doing elections. The voter rolls are public. Nearly, it's expensive in some states, but usually it's available to the public. But what he's doing is he's freezing everybody who's eligible to vote in the election. So you can't end up with some extra names. He's literally freezing the record. So he's got these will really make some secure elections when he gives you all four.
Super. Okay, what's the next one, Ken?
Well, and then after the election, there would be 3 documents released. First would be the cast vote record, which is a big spreadsheet of every ballot. Every ballot is on a row, and all of the choices that were on that ballot are the columns in that spreadsheet. And so you can look at any ballot you want. There's no voter identification information in the cast vote record. You don't know how someone voted, but you know that on ballot 692, if you wanted to pick that one, the system recorded these votes in the various races that were available. The second
I just want to take a minute to just explain that, because a lot of people do not know what a cast vote record is. And these cast vote records are really turning out to be very important when we're trying to track elections publicly. And it's a sort of an odd term. People haven't really, it's not commonly used, but the cast vote record is basically a document that tells you how the voting machine interpreted your vote, because it is the voting machines that are counting our votes. And so there's all these paper ballots, and then the voting machine, it looks at the votes, and there's a lot of different ways that technology can work. Often there's like a kind of a timing sheet where it's like a grid, and the machine locates where the dot is on the grid, and that's how it counts the ballot. But however, whatever technology is used, it then will usually create a cast vote record, and it says, I saw this ballot, and this is how I counted it. This is how I interpreted it. And you can have a cast vote record for 1 ballot, and you can have a cast vote record for 2 million ballots in a spreadsheet. Is that correct, Ken? Did I get that pretty much right there?
That is correct. And some of the election management systems create a cast vote record for each ballot. And then, as you described, those are then accumulated in a cast vote record spreadsheet that you could look through and see all of the ballots. You don't know who voted any particular ballot, but in Maricopa County's case, their cast vote record has 2,089,563 rows and almost 800 columns of all the choices that were on each of the ballots. And you get down to the bottom, and it's very important that all of the votes that we counted for candidate Jones in column G or wherever it is add up to whatever they add up to. And that number.
And these would be released to the public in a timely fashion. I think you said, within 10 days?
10 days would be fine.
Okay. And then, so we've got 2 of your 4. What's your next one?
List of eligible voters before the election. After the election, before it's certified, you've got the cast vote record. Second group of documents that would be released would be the actual ballot images. Again, there's no voter identification on the ballot image, but the ballot images correspond with the record, the cast vote record. So you can look at ballots 563, and anyone, the loser, the winner, a political party, an election scrutinizing organization or whatever.
Scrutineers. We have one called scrutineers.
I'm learning that word from Bennie and John.
Yep, Emily is gonna get us.
Okay. anyone can look and see, here's the ballot image for 500 ballot number 563. And I can look at the cast vote record and see that all of the votes on that ballot were correctly recorded and registered in the cast vote record.
Okay, and then let's move on to your fourth document, your
The
fourth
fourth
request.
document would be the list of who voted. And that doesn't tell how they vote. It just says, did Ken Bennett
You
vote
wanna
in the election?
participate.
Yes or no?
And that's a
all the
full-on
yes-
reconciliation.
And that's, yeah, and all the yeses should add up to the same number of ballots that were cast. And all the people that are on the list of who voted should be findable on the list of who was eligible to vote to
Yeah.
dispel any notion that unauthorized voters somehow came in and cast a ballot.
And then we have a question here, and it's a good one from Julie Weiner. And I know that there are accommodations for this. What is done to ensure that people who are escaping domestic abuse or other criminal harassment have their addresses remain secret? And there's almost always provisions for that.
Yeah.
And we would honor those provisions. For Maricopa County, for example, they have 2.6 million registered voters, and there's about 4,800 battered women, judges, police officers that are on a protected voter list. And yes, for those voters, there wouldn't be a name and there wouldn't be an address, but you would at least know that there's a number of them that's reasonable to the county's records in the first place.
Yeah.
And so you'd see that there's, 3,000 or 4,000 protected voters, and 80% of them voted, or 62%, or whatever. And
Yeah.
so you'd at least know that tens of thousands of unauthorized individuals didn't come in from somewhere else.
And they,
Now,
I can add one thing, Lulu.
Yeah.
When you get the list of the participating voters, you're also going to get the voting method. So most of those in Tennessee is called safe at home. Most of those voters will have the option to vote by mail. So you will see those collected in a certain bucket. So it will also give you the proper delineation where you can know that even though an address isn't there, it's proportional to a county of a certain size, and the method is going to give you the variation.
Super. So I think it's just really helpful for people to know that you're actively working with the Senate and the House there in Arizona. And it sounds like when we talk that you have every confidence that you can get these suggestions passed into law there. Is that correct?
I think if we work in a bipartisan fashion, we should be able to get a majority of Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate. I'm Republican, but I don't believe any less or more in election integrity than you or Bennie or anybody else does. And I think Bennie's a good Democrat from Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. So this should not be about right versus left. It should be about what's right and wrong. And what's right is having enough transparency. And you were talking about this earlier from your smart elections work, to give people the confidence that the votes were counted accurately.
And we really need to have more guidance about who is going to be doing audits. We are very much in favor of auditing agencies that are neutral organizations with trained auditors, people who are either government auditors or election auditors, or someone like we have Virginia Martin is an election official that we work with a lot, who developed hand count techniques that are very accurate and quick. And people who have skills at this are the people who we need to be trusting with oversight of our auditing processes. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but also remember that if we release in a transparent form the correct information, the list of who is eligible and who voted, the cast vote record and the ballot images, now you open the scrutinizing of that election to anybody who wants to. The losing candidate campaign can audit that election. The winning candidate, a county political committee, a state political committee, the media, a university, Smart Elections, Audit USA that John and Bennie and I work with. Whoever wants to audit can audit the election.
They can.
It's all the same data.
But what we have also seen is that it is the people who are formally in charge of counting votes that determine the results. And so that is why we believe it is so important for votes to be formally counted not by amateurs, but by people who really understand all the process of making what you call a ballot library or a ballot manifest, where ballots are organized carefully and understand whether they're risk limiting audits or full hand count audits. We need professionals overseeing our audits, and separate agencies. You know, when the IRS comes and audits you, they don't say, "Hey, Ken, would you just mind checking your tax returns?"
Right.
We're not, you know, the IRS sends a professional auditor, an independent auditor, and they check the results. And I think I would encourage you to, in your work, setting up statutes and setting up guidelines, to really look into how that can be done. Can independent trained agencies?
I couldn't agree more, Lulu. And for example, I described the hand count audit here in Arizona, and we have the county that conducts the hand count audit and then wonders if people trusted them as to the results. I think it helps everyone, including the county or whatever election jurisdiction is conducting the election in the first place, to have the audits that happen, however they happen, to be from independent professional groups that can't be accused of having some bias of, the fox guarding the hen house.
Right. And I will tell you one thing that we had, one criticism of those original audits and why they were considered so weak was that the batches to be audited were picked ahead of time, before the results were announced.
That's a very known thing in Arizona.
Yeah. And so if you tell,
been that way for decades.
It's the same. Think about your IRS, analogy. If you tell people, I'm going to audit your tax returns January through March, they're like, great, I'm going to do my cheating from April until December.
Right.
So you cannot announce ahead of time which batches are going to be audited. And so we called that type of an audit election security theater. And that is basically what we considered the original audits that were done. They were not strong audits.
I agree. So we need to release information so that anybody can scrutinize an election. And when we do engage auditors, they need to be independent and not auditing things that they told the world, I'm going to set aside this is what happened. This is what happened in Maricopa County. Out of 10,341 batches, they set aside before the election 52 batches and said, of these 52 batches, we're going to count 26 of them. And they did, and they matched. But there's a lot of people that say, as you just said, you just told the world which 52 you were going to count. If somebody's going to mess with the election, they're going to mess with the other 10,289.
Of course. And I'm going to switch out and we're going to wrap up here. We are a little bit over time. And I know, Bennie, you were trying to get in there and I was on the bully pulpit. Do you want to jump in?
No, I'm good now.
You're good?
Yeah,
okay. All right. So I think we can go to a screen like this to say goodnight. So everyone is on there. And we are just so grateful to you for coming and talking to us about this. I encourage people to look in the chat. There were a lot of really good questions. I'm going to just ask you one more if you can. I don't know if you can answer this very briefly, but this is from Jan Bendor. And she said the Department of Justice sent a letter to the Arizona legislature to warn them of their violation of federal election retention law. And under this law, all election materials must stay in the custody of the election official in charge. Allowing an outside contractor to receive and handle all these materials is a blatant violation. And she asked, when is the federal violation going to be enforced? In your opinion, was there a violation of federal law through the audit?
No, because Arizona law allows a judge to make election information available for a hand count, a recount, whatever it is. And when the Arizona Senate subpoenaed the election materials from Maricopa County challenged that in Superior Court, and the court said there is a legitimate reason for the Arizona Senate, as half of the lawmaking body of the state of Arizona, to look at an election to see, are there things that we can do better to improve our elections in the future. The Senate was very careful to not subpoena that information for the purpose of overturning or deciding whether the election results were correct back in November. They clearly and only said that they were doing the audit to see if Arizona laws can be improved for elections going forward. Had they made anything else part of the audit, I think they would have had trouble with the courts in the first place in Arizona, and by then definition have also put federal law in jeopardy as well. But I don't think they violated either federal or state law, because it was challenged in court and a judge agreed that that information could be released to them, which is how it happens in Arizona in the first place.
That is so fascinating. So are you telling me that the audit itself could never have overturned the results of the election because that was not its intent?
Please go
right?
into this, Ken, because you did this on camera like 100 times, and no matter how many news agencies you spoke to, they all ignored it.
Yeah. No, there was no way. There's no mechanism in Arizona for the state Senate or this audit or anything to have overturned the election results. And the President Karen Fann and the Senate was clear over and over and over again that this has not, there's no potential for overturning the election. We're just going to look at how the election was conducted to see if we need to improve our state statutes and laws for elections going forward. There was no possibility for the audit to overturn the election.
That's fascinating. I have to say that if you have a good audit mechanism, it actually must have the ability to change the results of the audit, to change the results of the election. Because
if we can audit, as I said, we should be auditing elections within 10 days, not 10 months. And that 10 days needs to be before the certification, because yes, if there's a problem with an election, it needs to be identified in an audit prior to the certification or canvass of that election.
Right.
Absolutely. And then Neil McBurnett in the chat is also pointing out that chain of custody is very important. And we didn't have time to get into that. You're of course right there, Neil. And we will actually do an entire forum on chain of custody next year. So we're going to say thank you so much, Ken. And we're going to, we're just so grateful to you for coming on and discussing this in such a sort of like open, nonpartisan, objective way, and being open to input and critiques.
Y'all don't know how cool Ken is. Ken took me to the Grand Canyon. I went and stayed at his house. He drove like 4 hours from Phoenix to drive me 3 hours to his house, to 3 hours to the Grand Canyon, and then 4 hours back to Phoenix to drop me back off with John. And we had a great time talking about elections.
Amazing. So we look forward to being in touch with you going forward. It's really, really great that you're sharing this information with us.
Thank you. And thanks for the work that Smart Elections does. I hope people will support your call for support, because this organization and others like Audit USA that Bennie and John Brakey and I work with, and Smart Elections and many others must have their voices heard about how to conduct our elections and the audits thereof in a way that convinces everyone, especially the losers, that the election was done accurately.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, so that is our forum for the evening. We did go a little long, but honestly, I thought that was fascinating. I feel like I learned so much. How about you, Bennie?
Well, I didn't, because I was there with him.
You did not learn a single thing.
I told you a lot of this stuff in real time.
Not a single thing. You didn't learn a single thing.
No, I told you a lot of this stuff. I was working with Ken. I tell you a lot of this stuff in real time.
All right. Well, I learned a lot, and I hope that the audience did. I see some cool things here. Virginia Martin, wonderful session, great session. Really appreciate that. Please do put your comments in the chat. We love to see those. They're very helpful. And then we have a request from Tim White. Mr. Bennett, please release your emails and texts. Okay, we'll follow up with him about that. That's great. So we're just going to wrap up a little bit. One thing that you can do that is so incredibly helpful, whether you have been able to donate to us or not, is to share our posts on social media. We are not getting the kind of traction that we need to really get, a high level of donations in. And we are on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, I put us up on TikTok today, our video. We're on LinkedIn. And so please do share our posts on social media if you're on there. Our Twitter account is at @smart_elections. I think we have it up here. Anything else you want to say, Bennie?
No, I think this was a really good one for the books. Ken is a very credentialed individual, and he was in the hot seat for a long time, and people really didn't know what the dynamic was. And when I got there by day 2, I knew it, and I'm glad he got to explain, how things actually went versus how the media and everything else was interpreted.
Absolutely. So there is our Twitter handle. Oh, right there is our Twitter handle. Please do share our posts on social media. You are our PR machine. We are very small. We do not have a professional PR person. It is you. So when we send you those emails, send them to your friends, send them to your networks, let them know to sign up for our forums and come and spend this time with us and learn about our elections. It's so important. Do sign up for our next forum. We have a few events coming up in January. I think the best thing is to get on the mailing list. As I said at the top of the show, go to the website and get on the mailing list, and then you will get the information. We have a forum, not a forum actually, but an event on January 6th. We're going to have a nonpartisan vigil where people can share their feelings about what happened on January 6th. And I encourage everyone to come. It's going to be on Zoom, and I think it's really going to be meaningful. And then starting in January, we're going to reboot the forums. We're going to have an Ask Me Anything night on January 18th. Maybe we can persuade Bennie to come if he's available. And you'll be able to ask at least me and possibly other experts anything you want on that night. That you put that on your calendar. That's January 18th. And then we are going to reboot the forum next year and really trying to lay it out like a curriculum. If you have special things that you want us to cover, please do send us an email, contact@smartelections.us, with special requests that you want that you want to see when we reboot the forum next year. And go ahead and get yourself signed up. It's always the same link. It's the same Mobilize link where you sign up. And I'm going to put that into the chat. Please do sign up. They're every other Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, as you know. So this is to sign up for the next forum. That link is in the chat. Okay, we're going to say good night. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will see you in the new year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
This is what democracy looks like.